And that's why I want to be able to bring everybody here together to talk about tenant management. And so sometimes when you have your concept of, you know, having a good tenant or having a bad tenant, but the most importantly is about our tenant screening. You know, what do you do for your tenant screening?
My biggest red flag is always not wanting to share information with me. We look for some consistency. First of all, our application is always the same for every unit, regardless of whether a tenant is employed or on social assistance. It is the same application. Everybody competes equally. When you say that your last address was 123 Main Street, but meanwhile, you know, your copy of your ID says that you lived somewhere else, it's not necessarily a giant red flag, but it means something.
If I catch one person in a lie, I will rip up their application in front of them, just so they know that why they lost out. Or I'll tell them openly, like, I caught you in a lie, and they tried to explain. I'm like, trust is number one. I'm giving you a $500,000 unit or $1 million unit. If I can't trust you in that, why do I want you in it?
Okay, so thank you so much everyone for tuning in onto the Canadian Real Estate Channel. My name is Kayla Andrade. I am the founder of Ontario Landlords Watch. You must have seen me on the channel before talking about many different important topics about real estate. But today I brought some friends with me. To the right of me, who's actually in beside me right now, is Connie Cody. She has just finished a campaign for the federal election, but I'll let you get a little bit of detail about Connie and where she comes from, because I think bringing multiple people into a conversation regarding tenant management is going to be very important for you guys all to learn about tenant management and how you can learn from other people's past mistakes. And that's definitely where many of our investors do learn, is learning from other people's past mistakes or learning from their own mistakes. So the best people I can bring to you today is also Irene, and we have Tom. So before we get into knowing who these people are, I want you to meet Connie. Connie's going to give us a little bit of information about who she is and what she's done. And I know that she's been an absolute, my right hand when it comes down to thinking about different solutions to propose to the elected officials, as well as the landlord and tenant board. So Connie, thank you.
Hi there. I don't have to introduce myself too much more. I think Kayla did a very good job of that. And hi, Irene and Tom. Thank you for joining us today as well. And thank you, Kayla, for having us. Like Kayla said, I just recently completed running the federal election for our riding here at home. And I've been helping Kayla with Ontario Landlords Watch, helping bring the balance between tenants and landlords. I am not a landlord, I am a homeowner. And I've had to deal with a lot of people in the social aspect, and being a community advocate and helping a lot with community. So we've worked together for many years on issues starting from water billing from way back when.
Oh, you're making me sound old now.
Yeah, and being a government liaison, hoping to make better changes and writing a lot of reports and suggestions to help with affordability and housing and improve a lot of the policies. So pretty much.
We got to bring multiple voices. I know sometimes I could be wearing my landlord hat a little bit too tight, so I need to have someone else bringing me back to the ropes to make sure that what we are suggesting is going to be fair and balanced. And another person that's been supporting this grassroots movements of just bringing fairness to the residential and tenancy act and landlord and tenant board and just a better system in general is Irene King. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of the Canadian Real Estate Channel.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Nice to see all of you. I am a third generation property owner landlord in Toronto. I'm a first residential landlord. I'm a first generation commercial landlord. We've also just recently expanded into some other different areas of investing. I've been watching my parents and grandparents do this for many years. And I believe in the philosophy that any decision you make has to make sense for everybody involved. And I believe very strongly in fairness for all sides. So we own and manage in Toronto, Barrie, and just recently Collingwood. And we're always looking for new opportunities. Our focus is always families. The safety of our families is very important to us. But again, the common sense aspect of looking after every step of the rental process. And that's something I'm really looking forward to sharing with all of you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Irene. I know we had you on a Facebook Live many times before, and our passion comes out in us once we get started, doesn't it? It's almost like going to be a skit. It's like a little... Tom, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining the Canadian Real Estate Channel. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm
That's
glad
good.
everybody else is doing well as too. So a lot of people probably know me. I am a retired CPA. I've been active in the real estate world for almost 2 decades now. I participate in all different aspects of real estate. I started off initially just as an investor, but I've also branched out to property manager, motivator, advocating for both landlords and tenants, and actually moved into the renovation side of real estate. So I've seen almost everything you could think of out there. A lot of people have seen me on podcasts. I've spoken at many different events, been advertised in articles throughout Canada. But again, I do this just because I'm passionate about real estate and bringing help to both landlords and tenants. I'm trying to bring a balanced view to everything. We all know there is a bit of a skew. I'm not going to say which side it's going to, because I don't want to be biased to anybody. But I want to make sure that
you know where it goes.
Affordable for everybody and profitable for everybody too, because no one's going to go into business for charity. We're not here as charity people.
That's what it is. We always tell people it's a business. It's not a charity. At the point where you want to give to charity, give to charity. You know, this is a business that needs to make sense, and the numbers need to make sense, especially, you knowing your numbers, Tom. And that's why I want to be able to bring everybody here together to talk about tenant management. And so sometimes when you have your concept of, having a good tenant or having a bad tenant, but the most importantly is about our tenant screening. What do you do for your tenant screening, number one? And then we'll get into the concept of, now that you have a good tenant and they're asking for, multiple things, what do you do? Or you have a very bad tenant who's already setting the relationship down the wrong road. How do you manage that? And obviously, we don't want to end up at the landlord and tenant board. So this is why tenant management is very important for each investor to learn, because we like to try to deal with situations before having to go to the landlord and tenant board, because it is either A, it's not going to be fair in your favor, or it's going to be dragged out, and obviously the communication and the relationship breaks down even further. So in a tenant management, I want to have Connie answer the first one, just on the concept of, because being a homeowner and not being a landlord, and not having that landlord hat on, what would you want to see what would you want to see a landlord do to actually do the tenant screening in itself? Like when you have tenants who are calling you, they want to come and see your unit. What is your concept? What would you want to make sure you do as a homeowner in order to get your tenant to making sure you're getting a good tenant?
Well, credit, definitely. I want to make sure that since I'm a homeowner, I respect my property, put a lot of investment into it. So for me, I would want to make sure that the tenant that moves in is going to take care of my property the same way that I myself would take care of it. I wouldn't want a lot of damage and stuff, and I would want to make sure that we could have an open and trusting relationship with each other. I think it's important that if we can have communications, then it works out for a better relationship. And then this way here, when you have a give and take relationship, it's a little bit easier to work with. I want to make sure that, especially if you're sharing the same household, like if we were having a secondary suite, I want to make sure that there's respect on both sides, so that you can actually work well together, because you're going to be living with someone basically in the same dwelling.
Exactly. Like you talk about credit right off the bat, and I can see many, many different, tenant groups, and they talk about, oh, this landlord, they would not accept my application unless I had a score over 600. And I'm like, problem. There's a problem when that's all what landlords are now looking for is the score. Normally it's like, good credit, fair credit. Now we're looking at a concept that we want to see numbers. And that is, a good thing when it comes down to the concept that we do have Landlord Credit Bureau, and landlords can indeed report their tenants' monthly payment history to Landlord Credit Bureau, and helping them build their credit and helping them improve their credit with their current tenancy, so that they can show accountability when they want to move and they want to relocate. So number one, landlords, for Connie and I on this end of the block, is that credit, making sure that you're getting some good credit. tenants, because obviously you know that they care about their credit, and you know that you can impact their credit if they do decide to not pay rent or cause any type of damages or not pay any type of utilities. Irene, what do you look for? Number one.
So we look for some consistency. First of all, our application is always the same for every unit, regardless of whether a tenant is employed or on social assistance. It is the same application. Everybody competes equally. We are looking for consistency. When you say that your last address was 123 Main Street, but meanwhile, your copy of your ID says that you lived somewhere else, it's not necessarily a giant red flag, but it means something. We have been through so many good tenants and so many not so great tenants that, that is a red flag to us. It's a small red flag. It's what is the real history here? What is the real story? When you fill out your application and say that it's, John George Smith, and then on your photo ID, it's Fred James Smith. I have more questions to ask. I need to know who is going to be responsible for the unit, and I need to know, why your previous landlord actually called you Penelope. Like it comes down to your credibility, and not just from a credit number, but also from the type of person you are, the information that you have. We don't want to just talk to your most recent landlord, because sometimes you are moving out of mom and dad's house, and good for you for taking those steps. But maybe we do want to have a conversation with somebody from your place of employment. Again, every application is treated completely equally, which is a very important step for newer landlords or landlords with maybe fewer units. It's very important from a human rights perspective that every application be treated equally. When we call your employer and we're looking for information, have you been there? You say you've been there for a year, and the landlord's like, oh no, they just started last week. Again, not necessarily you're not deserving of the unit, but now we may have a few more questions for you. So
now, would you actually would you call the employer yourself, or are you okay with like a letterhead letter saying that this is a person they worked here for this long? And would
right.
you
so we actually require both. We do both. Okay. So first and foremost, we ask them to provide us with the letter. And in all fairness, we're a small business. Our letterhead might not look official as some big fancy law firm's letterhead. So we always follow it up with a phone call. And we always start with the phone or the name of the supervisor or whoever signed the letter, and we go from there. Again, our primary focus is consistency. When I Google that company, they may not exist, and that's fair. But if I Google them, I need them to be at that address. I need that person to be a real person that answers the phone, or when I call and get the human resource department, hi, I'm looking for so-and-so. We don't have anybody in that department. That's a concern.
Yeah.
And again, that comes from a place of having not so great tenants get approved, get moved in, and not be such great tenants, and then have to go through the harder processes with them. So we're a little bit more robust with our application in the hopes that we can deal with some of those issues up front.
No, that makes sense, because the whole ID, you're supposed to do it within 30 days of changing your ID, showing your new address where it is, and that's really a good indicator. And all landlords should be making sure that they're getting the ID from all their clients in order to, make sure the name is spelled right, their legal name, as well as their birth date. So you can't, report them to the credit bureaus when need be. We
also can't fill out landlord and tenant board forms. A misspelling of a name could be devastating to an application to evict a tenant or have them accountable for any rent owing.
Exactly.
But even more so, when someone is applying for a unit who is on any type of social assistance, to make sure that that name and information is correct. We ask for proof of income, which can be a job or some type of social assistance, and we ask for contact information for the worker. And again, we're consistent. Every application is treated fairly, but I need to know that that person does have that social assistance coming in.
Now, quick question for you too is, how do you get the tenant to open up to you? You want them, like, obviously you got to be very cautious in what questions you're asking. You don't want to be very invasive, like it's a job interview. You want them to feel friendly, to tell you about them, because you're putting them in a home that obviously is going to cost you a lot of money if you get the wrong one. How do you get your tenants to open up to you when you're doing that in-person hearing?
So first of all, the person who's showing the unit, depending on the property, might be one of my maintenance staff. It might be myself. It might be my superintendent, depending on the building or the house. Whoever does the showing is only there to show them the property, answer their questions, and have that open conversation. They're not, like, they may hand them the application, but they're not the ones going through it. So we kind of have like a checks and balances. The person in our office who receives the application is strictly looking at it from an analytical standpoint. What I have on paper. This person's name doesn't match their ID. We go to the person who showed the unit. And that's when they say, oh, well, you know, they were staying with grandma and, you know, grandma's address. And we kind of fill in the blanks that way. But we also have that extra check and balance because more than one person is involved in the application.
Nice. Now, Tom, come on. I know you're like.
I look at really two things, and it actually brings in everything you guys already talked about. My two big things is honesty and compatibility. So I'm specialized in renting out places that have multiple units within the same building. So honesty, if I catch one person in a lie, I will rip up their application in front of them, just so they know that why they lost out. Or I'll tell them openly, like, I caught you in a lie, and they tried to explain. I'm like, trust is number one. I'm giving you a $500,000 unit or $1 million unit. If I can't trust you in that, why do I want you in it?
Yeah.
And then the compatibility is, are you going to get along with the other tenants?
Yeah.
So I'm going to use the extremes. I'm not going to put in teenagers in a basement or upstairs unit, and in the other unit is senior citizens. The chances of them going to get long term is going to be seldom. And I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm just trying to find people that are in the same cohort. So if I got a middle-aged family upstairs with kids, I'm going to want somebody that likes kids in the basement, kind of thing. So they don't scream at each other when they hear the other child playing. I've had people complaining and calling the police. I actually had one person would call me 15 times in a day because the kids upstairs are playing. I'm going, the kids, what do you want them to do? And especially like right now in COVID, when people aren't allowed to go out, what am I going to have? And the person actually would take a broom and pound the ceiling to try and tell the other people to stop.
Wow.
And she denied it. And then when I was doing my inspection, I see all these like ping pong dots up on the ceiling. What's that from? And she's like, I'm like, what's that hole from? The broom went right through the ceiling. Oh,
it's not.
That was my daughter, and she did it once. Okay, once, but why do I got 100 dots? So that's what I mean. I gotta find compatibility. Like, and sometimes, you know what? The ones that you think are gonna get along, they're like oil and vinegar, and they fighting cats and dogs. I actually had I can't make this stuff up. I have like a 5 to 6 car driveway, double wide, and it's 2 apartments in it. So they got lots of parking. I used to get phone calls saying someone's in my parking spot. And even the LTB told me to do this, is go over and paint lines. So I actually called them up and said, do you want me to treat you like a child and actually go paint lines over there? And did you read your lease that I'm allowed to change the parking spots from 1 to 2, 3, 4, and 5? And they still would call. And one of them didn't even own a car. Believe it or not. It'd be a friend coming over and parking. It's not like, could you move your car? They're not blocking anybody in, but come on, people. Grow up and be an adult.
See, Tom's got it. Like, you got the honesty, and you got to, if you catch them in one lie and something's not making sense, go with your gut, and you got to make sure that you're still going to continue to keep doing more showings, because it's just to the concept. If they're able to lie about something just to get into the unit, what other lies can they do as they're in? And definitely the compatibility is that, yeah, you do have, you know, multi-units. You do need to make sure that you're keeping the enjoyment. You have a duty to, you know, keep the reasonable enjoyment of tenants. And so if you don't address one tenant's issue, then the other tenants that are complaining about it, they can come after you at the Landlord and Tenant Board. You have to show the adjudicator that, hey, I'm doing everything to accommodate these tenants and to try to keep the reasonable enjoyment of the tenants. But sometimes you see what could happen if you get the wrong tenant into a rental unit when it's not compatible to who is living there now. It's, you got to play matchmaker, not only as a landlord and a tenant, but you got to play matchmaker as tenants and tenants, because that's what's going to really create that community that each landlord would love to have for their unit. Now, I don't know how long time we're going to be able to keep going on this, because I know that I know that we're doing some recording on here, so I don't know exactly how long we'll be able to keep going on this topic, because I know there's so much to do. But I think that there's always got to be a lesson learned. You know, obviously, Irene, you talked about having that bad tenant. If you got back now and you're looking at your red flags, what red flag jumped out to you and resulted into knowing that that is something that's taught you a good lesson?
The information that they weren't willing to share. If there's something on an application that you're not comfortable writing down, for example, we ask for a copy of your photo ID. We're allowed to do that as long as we ask everyone equally. I want to make sure that when I do approve you and we do meet to sign the lease, that it really is you. Your name, I need to make sure that you're a real human being. If you're not willing to provide that, I've got to wonder why. I've got to wonder, you know, why you're only willing to give me, you know, little bits and pieces of information. We had an incident where we were renting out a house. It was a very nice house. This was about 5 years ago. The rent was $4,000 a month plus utilities. This is a pretty decent house, fully renovated. And we actually used a real estate agent to find us the perfect tenant. And we got the applications in, and there were like gaps. And all I did was Google this person's name. And I mean, we all have so much information at our fingertips. And I actually found some news articles about these people. And they were in fact serial tenants who were going from property to property and destroying units and taking, unfortunately, due to the Landlord and Tenant Board, the process, they were taking their sweet time and they were living in these units, mistreating them, causing thousands and thousands of dollars of damage. No wonder this person didn't want to give me their information. But in turn, you know, I always try and look at it from both sides. These people need a place to live, but unfortunately, it's not going to be my place. I can't take another chance on somebody like you. That my biggest red flag is always not wanting to share information with me.
It's almost like when they're filling out the application and they don't have the information on hand. It's like, how do you not have your landlord's phone number? Like in your
we have so many people that show up with truthfully like a whole package of can I apply right now? You know, and then there's the people that are like, oh, well, why do you want to know where I work?
And you know what? Perfect right there is the package. We've had many people come into, and you have a package. They have their their credit score already there. They have their pay stubs already there. They have, and they like, what really wows me is when they have that personal letter, right? And knowing that, you know, that could be a good thing when you have a good tenant coming to you. They know what your requirements are. They want to present you and everything. But showing the urgency to like, I need it now type of deal, that is what kind of gives me a little bit of a red flag. But again, be cautious, because all these credit checks out there, they are there's a video on YouTube teaching people how to manipulate a credit score. So making sure that you're always going to be taking your own credit check. And Landlord Credit Bureau now has Equifax. Oh my God, they're beautiful. They give you so much information. We thought we had a good tenant, and I did a credit check through Equifax. It's a hard check that was able to pull out so much information. We now went on to option number 2. It was fantastic. Tom, give me a red flag before we
exactly what you guys kind of mentioned, talking about if they're missing information. Or, you know, one of my biggest red flags is I put stuff on the ad, and if I just get, and I actually put it on my ad, if you respond, is this available? I'm going to delete you. Like, aren't you taking the damn time to read it? I know they're having a hard time finding a place, and people are just mass going out, like applying to everything. I hate to say it, I don't care.
Oh, I keep
my business. My time is valuable, and you know, honestly, sometimes I will respond. I will feel a little nice and like, okay, I got my button too. It says right here, yes, it's available. If you don't respond within like 2-3 hours, I delete you. That's all. I've been compassionate way too many times, and that's, unfortunately, I'm not as compassionate as I used to be. If you don't meet my criteria, and you know, I'm not looking for A++ tenants. My preferred tenant is a B+ tenant.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Someone that can actually paint a wall if there's a scratch on it and I don't get a phone call. Can you come and paint my wall because I have a scratch? No, I can't. Even though I use the same paint color in every one of my units, so I can just take a little paint can. There you go. It's painted.
So guys,
making sure everything's filled out.
If you have a tenant, it's a good one, great. If we have a bad one, definitely follow. You need to read every rule from the Residential and Tenancy Act to the Landlord and Tenant Board and know how to deal with that in particular tenant. There's going to be lots of things that we want to say verbally. Sometimes the tenants can take that out of text. They'll probably even try to have it recorded just so that they can try to get a rent rebatement off of, you know, the Landlord and Tenant Board. So we have to really put ourselves into being that business mindset. We talk about it being a business, so making sure that we are putting our thought process and our reasoning to behind an action that we want them to take, and put that in writing. Obviously give them time within that letter to do what we are asking them to do, and if they fail to do that, then we start looking at different type of Landlord and Tenant Board forms, and where it's going to inform the tenant that if they fail to meet the deadline on that notice, that we will be filing to the Landlord and Tenant Board. And that's what we want the Landlord and Tenant Board to be, is that it's not a system where we just have a minor dispute and we want you to deal with it. This is like, I'm at the end of my rope. I've already tried to deal with this tenant multiple times for many, many months. Obviously, the communication, the relationship has broken down. Obviously, you can't run a good business on a bad relationship. So obviously, that's why we're at the Landlord and Tenant Board, and we will continue to keep learning from other landlords who have been dealing with the Landlord and Tenant Board, who has been doing their part, filling out the proper forms, and just still not getting the type of judgment that they hope to get at the Landlord and Tenant Board. So that brings us to a conclusion of management for this episode. There's many more tips that we're going to be able to share with you in the future, but make sure you check out our next video where we talk about the Landlord and Tenant Board, what's happening there from experienced investors as well as people who are running and knowing about what's happening on the government level of how, you know, it is affecting and impacting the housing industry. Hit subscribe to the Canadian Real Estate channel, and if you're looking to find me, Kayla Andrade, you can find me on Ontario Landlords Watch as well as on Facebook for members. And Irene, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, how can they connect with you?
Our website, tobis.ca. We're just redeveloping a new one, actually, with some exciting new features about real estate investing in Toronto. But that's where you'll find me. Perfect.
Thanks so much. Tom, how can we get a hold of you?
You guys can get a hold of me on a couple different contacts. Tom Sullivan 55@gmail.com. Best Choice Rental Properties @gmail.com. DT Renovations 1@gmail.com. And I don't even mind giving up my number. My number is 289-923-9086. That's for both landlords and tenants, because I do not mind helping out tenants as well, because I'm tired of bad landlords.
Exactly.
I want to get rid of them as much as I want to get rid of bad tenants out there.
Amen to that, Tom. And Connie, how can we get a hold of you?
Because you're always getting a hold of me through Kayla at Ontario Landlords Watch as well. I won't give up my personal phone number for that.
My phone's ringing off the hook. If anyone's calling, I am going to get back to you and help you. We're just helping so many landlords at the same time, and we're only, you know, a few people trying to make a difference in the world and, you know, be the change that you would like to see in the world. Until we do this again, guys, we want to thank you for watching and giving your comments. Tell us your tips, your tricks, you know, what your red flags are in the comments in this video, and share it and be a part of this community, because because this is what it's all about, is creating that fair and balanced housing system for good landlords, good tenants, and taxpayers. I want to thank you for watching. I'm Kayla Andrade.